but I have two very eminent panelists on either side. They've been introduced, so I won't waste time. Basically, the way we'll run it is opening remarks, disagreement, agreement if any, questions from the audience, and then go home. We'll go home. I think the larger issue that we're discussing today is, has democracy become a crutch for apathy, for lethargy, for postponement of policy decisions, for not doing what we need to do? I'm tired of this odious comparison with China where we say, but China is doing well because they're not a democracy. It's a perverse argument, because if you ask people who are really poor, downtrodden, denied every single opportunity their way, for them democracy means nothing either. My contention is, and it was said famously, I can't remember if it was Bertrand Russell or someone else, with forms of government, let fools contest, that which is governed best is best. We're not here, I believe, making a case for the emergency, even though many people in the audience follow modern-day Gandhi. We're not making a case that India needs to turn into a dictatorship. But I think both these panelists should attempt to examine the contours of our democracy today, what it stands for, and where it needs to go beyond the electoral process that happens once in every 5 years. Because that alone can't be the birthmark of democracy. So I'd request Dr. Quraishi to open the session, after which Swapan will, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Suhel, ladies and gentlemen. This topic sounds like a topic of a debate where you have to argue for or against the motion. But I am reminded of an officer who was appearing for IS examination. And in the interview, she was asked to speak for 3 minutes, arguing that omelette is better than fried egg. She asked for a minute, she organized a thought, and she spoke brilliantly. Then the member of the UPSC said that in the IAS you are supposed to examine both sides of the picture and now argue the other way, that omelette is better than fried egg. She asked for another minute and she argued brilliantly again. My answer to today's question also is going to be more in this line, that I'll analyze both sides instead of taking a position, because I'm sure there will be more clarity when my other two panelists speak. India, the USP worldwide, I think, is democracy. Wherever you go in the world, if people know two things about India, one, it's a large country, and it is democracy. How big is this democracy is something which not many people know. We are the largest, but how large? With 75 crore voters, we have more voters than all 50 countries of Europe put together, plus all 40 countries of North America put together, 90 countries rolled into one. And we have the diversity which we have to manage, all kinds of diversity which has been discussed in the last 2 or 3 sessions, ethnic, linguistic, cultural, religious, and what have you. Despite that, our maybe poor country has created a model which is appreciated worldwide. By lunchtime, the nation knows the result. There are the cases when people have lost by 1 vote and have accepted the verdict of the people with folded hands. The living example is now in the Union Cabinet, Mr. C.P. Joshi. He could have been Chief Minister of Rajasthan if he had won. He lost by 1 vote and accepted the verdict. Later on, he contested Lok Sabha and he is now a Member of Parliament. We see that in the election, the people's participation is generally moderate. In the Lok Sabha election, it has been averaged about 60% for the last 62 years. But as you go lower down, it becomes very, very hot. The Vidhan Sabha election has better turnout, and Panchayati Raj elections definitely have very, very high turnout, and the elections are fought with great vigor. Why? Why are people interested in the democracy? Because the elections are an opportunity when people hold the governance accountable. They ask about, they talk about their expectations on development, health, employment, and corruption. And that's why they participate. Now the question is the democracy leading to regression? Again, my answer here is yes and no. In many ways, yes. In many ways, no. But first, I would say why probably we are not regressing. We have seen a lot of progress in the last 60 years. Let's compare ourselves with our neighbors. We were the same people, got free at the same time, and where are we and where are they? Probably democracy made the difference. From 14% literacy in 1947, we are now more than 75. Life expectancy has doubled. Nutrition, IMR, and agriculture, irrigation, power, you name it. Everywhere we have made substantial progress. It may not be enough, but we surely have made substantial progress. Now, at the time of election, each party tries to outdo rivals in making promises. Attractive programs are announced. There are programs for minorities, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes. Then you have seen there is a competition of manifestos. Free television, free the pressure cooker, free this, free that. There is a lot of debate whether this is a very unhealthy competition or is it all right. My personal view, which I resisted voicing earlier, but maybe I can now, is I see frankly no harm. After all, with the standard of living that we are talking about, all the progress and the divide between the two Indias that we have been talking about, particularly in the last two sessions, what will it lead to? Improved standard of living? As the evident from the quality of life, you will have a TV, you will have a fridge, you will have all the amenities of life. If some party promises a TV and delivers, what's wrong? I'm reminded of Rajiv Gandhi's famous statement that when you give 1 rupee, only 15 paise reach the people. Where do 85 paise go? At least in this case, when you promise a TV, it is not the shell which goes to the people, the whole TV at least reaches the people. The money which would have helped them to buy these things, at least these products are being delivered to them. Probably there is a merit in what's happening. Distribution of bicycle, laptop, I think they're all quite positive things to talk about. Now, the other side, which is probably more serious, we are also going down. Democracy is also proving counterproductive. Casteism, Farashar was talking about the social structure. I can assure you casteism has increased because of democracy. People who did not know their caste now know their subcaste. You know about your gotra, you know about your khap. These were the terms which were not really known so much as they are now, because these are the kind of vote banks which are encouraged. Similarly, there is communal polarization. It has reached dangerous proportions. Ethnic divide, entire Northeast. Every tribe is fighting against the other. And when we were managing the elections in those states, we knew how serious the problems were. In the vote bank politics. I find it very funny that what is the definition of vote bank? We see the total double standard. The standard reply would be, my voters are genuine voters, your voters are your vote bank. And the other fellow will say the same thing. But the fact is that there are vote banks of various kinds which are being encouraged by the political system democracy. In corruption, we are again going down. Every election is contested in the name of fighting corruption. You know, recall every election and what happens. I would not like to comment because Suhel will make a more powerful statement on that. Then the next election, again we fought on corruption. My own, what I have been saying publicly is that election has become the biggest source of corruption in the country. Why? Because crores of rupees are spent. There is a legal ceiling of 40 lakhs for Lok Sabha and 16 lakhs for Vidhan Sabha. But anecdotally we know, politicians in the private conversation tell us and dare us to catch them. They say 5 to 10 crores are spent on every election, even Vidhan Sabha election. Now if you spend 10 crores for an election, where does the money come from? And how will you make up for it? The first thing that a minister does is to call his officers, and he says, I've invested 10 crores, you start paying me hafta or monthly, because I have to repay. That is when the nexus between politician and bureaucracy begins, and the corruption, the vicious cycle of corruption starts. Criminality. 60 years ago, criminals could not think of a winning election. Now, probably they are put up by all parties because of the concept of winnability. They must win an election, and they feel they may be a criminal or a toughie, and those kind of people. I don't want to use strong adjectives. I'm leaving them for Suhel again. But these are the guys who are given tickets, and they even win. Then what is the way out? This is a paradox, that although the elections are fought in the name of good governance, but what is happening is just the opposite, and we need to do something about it. You might ask then, what is the government doing? What is the election commission doing? Of course, there are laws which prohibit use of caste and religion in election. We cannot intimidate scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. We take a lot of preventive measures. We have devised system of vulnerability mapping. Every village, we identify 10, 15, 20 gundas who can threaten a fair election, and take care of them beforehand. We try to ensure transparency, neutrality. Interestingly, this biggest election exercise which I've mentioned is conducted by bureaucracy. India is one rare country where the entire exercise is done by bureaucracy. 11 million people conducted the last general election with zero error. This is an interesting paradox. The same bureaucracy which is considered lazy, corrupt, and inefficient, when it comes under the election commission, they deliver a perfect election. In fact, you'll be familiar with the headings which you see in the newspaper. In the last election in Punjab, let EC Raj continue. Because all that we do is enforce laws, existing laws, nothing else. But why is it that we can't enforce those laws in other time? In any case, our Raj is 30 days, 30 to 40 days. But then we are able to ensure the laws which promote the good environment. You can't deface your property. You can't put up posters. There can't be any noise. We try and ensure a very peaceful and healthy environment for election. We try to seize money. We have set up an expenditure monitoring division. We see 73 crores in Tamil Nadu, another election, 53 crores in UP, another election. But despite that, although for every crore that we seized, I'm sure that we would have stopped at least 20 crores from flowing. But still, a lot of money reaches. They invent new modus operandi. Now the money starts changing hands much before election, months and maybe years before election. In various ways, we are making a checklist of the way you can cheat in election. And the secret will be that we have to be ahead of the crime, but which never happens. Finally, I would say that if we want to, from the biggest democracy, we want to become the greatest democracy, we have to introspect and do something. Electoral reforms, which we have been suggesting for a good 15 to 20 years, they need to be taken up without further delay. The criminals should be debarred from contesting even when the trial is pending. The reason they give that the law of the land is that you are innocent till proved guilty. Certainly. But then there are 4 lakh prisoners in Indian jails today, of which 2,68,000 are under trial, which means they have not been convicted, which means they are innocent, and you have taken away 4 of their fundamental rights. Right to liberty, freedom of movement, freedom of occupation, right to dignity. The right to contest is not a fundamental right, but then the political parties refuse to take this reform proposal. We have also been asking for more financial transparency of political parties, how they receive their funds, how they spend. We would like their accounts to be audited by an auditor to be appointed by us, or a panel to be suggested by us, because we have a situation where there are auditors for 30 years who are party ticket holders and they're auditing. There is conflict of interest very clearly. We would like all these audited accounts to be in the public domain so that people can see the nexus, which is the corporation which gave 5 crores, 10 crores, 100 crores, and what benefit was given by the government to them just after the election. These problems which I mentioned, I first feel that they can be substantially taken care of through the reform proposals which are pending. On the positive side, I would like to say that in the last 62 years, the first time the Union Law Minister came to Election Commission, had a 3.5-hour long meeting, Mr. Moily. We organized 7 regional consultations across the country to develop consensus around these reforms. 8th national consultation was to be held in Delhi. The date was fixed. Prime Minister gave the date, but that was the day when 4th of April 2011, when we had World Cup cricket final. Cricket crazy nation that we are, obviously that was not a good day to hold this meeting, which was postponed. The next date was fixed, 4th of July. That was the time when Anna Hazare was at Jantar Mantar and that movement was at its peak. Again, not the best time. Unwittingly, Anna Hazare's movement sabotaged our reform proposal. That meeting again got postponed and has never happened. And but the law minister came a second time to discuss the details for the national meeting. Then when the new law minister came, I wrote to him and updated him on what all has been happening and requested him to take it further. He also came. 3 meetings from Union Law Minister with Election Commission, in Election Commission, shows that probably there is political will. They do want to bring up the reform bill. We have discussed the draft bill. The draft bill is ready. It was to be brought up in the winter session of Parliament. But we know, we are not blind, that winter session was taken up entirely by Lokpal. So if our bill was not taken up, at least the government has an alibi. But now another winter session is gone, budget session is gone. I only hope the time for our reform proposal has come, and it has come now. Thank you very much.
Swapan.
Ladies and gentlemen, first an apology. Although we are talking about democracy, I think I must first admit that I have neither been involved with people's movements nor political movements. My upbringing has been tremendously privileged. My education has been tremendously privileged. I am, by choice, a person who prefers speaking in English. And therefore, whatever perspective I may bring may suffer from this discoloration. So that's the first. I mean, unlike Suhel, I don't necessarily pride in it. I make an apology about it. I'll start off with a very small, perhaps slightly trivial example. Some weeks ago, there was a very minor controversy in Orissa, or Odisha as it's called, which never made it to the pages of the national newspapers. And this centered on the question of honorary doctorates. Now, honorary doctorates are something which, you know, people like us who've got actual genuine ones are a bit wary about it, which is why we don't write doctor, because people will think you've got an honorary doctorate. So the governor of the state, in his capacity as chancellor of the various universities, decided to dole out honorary doctorates to a doctorate, an honorary doctorate to someone who perchance had got associated, not directly, but one step removed, with certain rather comments which were rather uncharitable to Orias. And I think that became a trigger to launch. I mean, there was a wave of outrage in the state. And of course, that got cancelled, and I think now, in future, His Excellency the Governor will probably be a little more circumspect. But I'm pointing this out only to suggest that whereas in the past you could dole out these freebies, a form of cronyism could be perpetuated. After all, I mean, backwater, Orissa, who cares? You know, something can be done. These days, it's a little more difficult. And part of the reason, perhaps, is democracy. Mr. Quraishi was talking about the varying turnouts in the polls. Now, one of the things which is very significant about turnout is that Lok Sabha, the turnout is X, Assembly, it's X plus 1, and at the Panchayat level, it's probably X plus 2. So the lower the level of democracy, the greater the interest. And I'm talking about this in the context of what Meera Shankar pointed out, that the need to develop a political consensus we are talking about. She mentioned the word of how we urgently need to develop a political consensus. And that's been a concern to a lot of people, that how long can we go along in this sort of fractious sort of way where we end up shooting ourselves in the foot. Now, last week, I loosely monitored a conference of chief ministers, which the BJP had called, to discuss mainly a coherent economic strategy, a strategy of governance. Now, here you're talking about one particular party. So there'd be a certain assumed commonality of thought. But let's see what came out. Of course, these proceedings need not always find their way into the media because the media thinks it's too boring. But what came across was that even within a national political party of which shared assumptions, you had such a vast difference. You had Mr. Modi talking about a situation where I think broadly speaking, you'd say where the trickle-down effect, where the role of the state is that of a facilitator, an enabler, where the emphasis is on the efficiency of the state. And I think he was talking, keeping in mind the context of Gujarat, which is inherently a very entrepreneurial state, which has the highest GDP, and people often, when you go abroad and talk to sort of gatherings, people say, oh, well, there is India and there's Gujarat. Well, that was one model. And then you also had Shivraj Singh Chauhan, who's an equally efficient, effective, popular chief minister, giving a very, very different, what might again, in case we want to use labels, had a very Keynesian sort of approach, where the state actually assumed a greater role in investment in infrastructure. Of course, that exists in Gujarat as well, but actually making large sums of welfare schemes. So when we're talking about one political party, two different forms of approaches, you can see what the problems in India are going to be. When we talk about the lack of consensus, why? This is not necessarily anyone being venal or anything. These are genuine problems. And I think the problem, if you really look upon it, Dinesh Bhai was talking about how the planning commission must do X, how he squares that up with Gandhian self-sufficiency is another matter altogether. I mean, one represents one end of the spectrum and the other extreme, and the planning commission represents the other extreme of the centralization scale. One of the greatest problems which we face in India is that increasingly bodies like the Planning Commission, bodies like the National Advisory Committee are dictating an agenda which has very little relevance to all parts of India. I'm not saying what they are saying is not relevant for some parts of India, But Gujarat wants to move over a faster trajectory. The right to food is already in existence in Odisha and Chhattisgarh. It will probably be a nightmare to implement in Uttar Pradesh, given the creaking public distribution or the non-existent public distribution system. When they evolved the Narega or MG Narega, whatever it's called now, they evolved a fixed criterion which gave emphasis on earthworks. No capital expenditure, very little capital expenditure, so that contractors don't benefit, and earthworks. In other words, you build a Kacha road and wait for the rains when we wait for it to go away. So there was no asset building. Moreover, some of the very rigid specifications applied there didn't make sense to a lot of states because the conditions were very, very different. The conditions which exist in Manipur cannot certainly exist in Gujarat, cannot exist in Punjab. And the model of development which we've taken up, by and large, still accords a disproportionate role to the center. In the battle between the Finance Commission and the Planning Commission, today it's almost 50-50. The Finance Commission gives a statutory thing to the states. The Planning Commission, not only a discretionary quota, but even the architecture of spending is determined by the Planning Commission, which is causing a huge degree of resentment because it goes against the basic tenets of democracy, of governments which are more and more accountable. It is not that governance in India does not exist. You know, there's the mood of gloom and doom which exists, which permeates. Even in this conference, we saw, outside when I was talking informally, this sense of drift, despair. What is it going to be? Is it going to be 5 years? How long will it take? But if you look at it in state-wise, the picture is not all that bleak. There are things happening. 5 years ago, when you talked about Bihar, invariably there would be a snigger. Bihar was a byword for a joke. But today there is hope. Likewise, the pace of growth in Gujarat is something stupendous. So we have areas of growth coexisting with areas of depression in India. Malgovernance. Democracy has meant that more and more people want accountability. And that accountability can be fixed at a level which they can identify. I think more than anything else, if we have become dysfunctional today as a democracy, and I think we have in various ways, it is because there is still too much in Delhi. After 1991, when we replaced the license control Raj with a form of market economy, there ought to have been corresponding political reforms. Those political reforms were never undertaken. And today we are in a situation where perforce, by the strength of third fronts, fourth fronts, regional parties, federal front, we are blundering into a situation where people want more for their states. Yes, there are problems, because one of the issues which the distribution of the centralization had was the idea of the redistributive center. Manipur does not generate enough resources to be viable. There are certain other states which too doesn't generate. But Jharkhand does through its mineral wealth. Odisha does through its mineral wealth. These are not being plowed back into those states. One of the incidental outcome of this Colgate issue was that an objection of the state government of Odisha, for example, which says, you are mining. The mining is a dirty industry. you are mining most of it from our state. It is only therefore logical that there should be a preferential allotment to industries based in our state. So one size fits all, which sometimes seems to be the assumption of various constitutional authorities, doesn't work in India. And I think therefore, there was a time when we used to talk about the unity and integrity of India being sacrosanct, etc. I think that's given. I don't think that is going to be compromised any longer. We have had a generation of people whose adoration for the national flag, whose sense of India, whose adherence to common values, etc., are there. But this has got to be supplemented by giving a meaningful empowerment to the states. And I think in the coming days, the type of politics which we are witnessing is going to, and it's not going to be trouble-free. I assure you, it's not going to be trouble-free. There's a lot of venality in the states as well. We all know that. But that's the direction in which we are moving. And the sooner we recognize it, the sooner we acknowledge it and make adjustments, I think it will be better. So I'm not all sort of gloom and doom about the future of India. I see a different trajectory in which things are moving. Thank you very much.
Super. Before I open it out to questions from the audience, I think there is enough to celebrate about India today. The land of Tagore, which once made us hold our head high without fear, is today the land of one of the brightest, calmest chief ministers India's ever seen. I mean, Mamata Banerjee represents the kind of calm that Mother Teresa would have been proud of. Pranab Mukherjee today is the President of the Republic, an honorable man. So what if he made a couple of mistakes? We've always rewarded failure with success. That is the magnanimity of our nation. And we need to celebrate that. I think we need to celebrate the fact that after 2 successive days of power failure, we make one gentleman the most powerful man in the Union Cabinet, other than, of course, the Prime Minister in Chidambaram. So I think we take ourselves far too seriously. We should be delighted with what we have. I can't call us the cockroach nation, which means we'll survive anything. But we certainly are the bumblebee. Aerodynamically, the bumblebee is not supposed to fly, but you see, the bumblebee doesn't know that, so it flies happily. If you go by all the parameters of success, we should have failed a long time ago, but we don't care. We're progressing. I think there are, however, 3 or 4 serious issues which emerged from Quraishi Saab and Swapan's comments. Number 1, let's not confuse electoral democracy with real democracy, where people are given an undeniable opportunity that is theirs for the asking. Number 2, Swapan mentioned, and rightly so, the venality and the tribulations that exist within the states are over making, not of recent times, but because it is inherent in the character of our history. So, that is going to continue to be fractious. It's going to cause a lot of friction. We need to find a solution. The third, I think the judiciary needs to be far more agile, because that is somehow the only institution that's left. I mean, I hope this army chief doesn't quietly order, tanks up Raisina Hill, if that story was true. But we've had even our services being denigrated in the way they shouldn't have. The bureaucracy is too far gone for us to make any positive comments right now, but I'm sure they will also regroup and recover. Finally, I think we have become ingeniously patriotic and less nationalistic. And there's a slight distinction. We want to wear the flag on our sleeve, but not, as Karuna and Shantanu in their earlier session mentioned, do what we're supposed to do as honest, tax-paying citizens. And the rot is far too deep. I was asked last week or week before that in London in a speech, where do you see India? And you've always got to bat for your country. And I said, look, there are problems, but we shall overcome. But it's not just the question of an anthem. I think some real cleansing needs to happen, and that can only happen if we have better characters in leadership, means of stronger character. That's kind of gone, which is why you have the kind of parliamentary fights and, abuse that we see today, which is why you have the kind of nonsense we're seeing across the country. So, all things considered, we shall overcome, we will triumph. There's a lot going for us. I think we need to, I don't know why this government refuses to communicate the good that it does. I think a lot of good has happened in the last 8-9 years. The economy has genuinely done well. There has been a tremendous inflow from below the poverty line into above the poverty line. 11 crore Indians today benefit from electricity, which had never happened. You've added almost, 50,000 megawatts of power or 20,000 megawatts of power, which had never happened. We somehow have become a nation where we want to only identify the problems. And somehow solution making and solution consensus escapes us. I don't think ever we are ever seeking consensus in terms of, finding a solution. I mean, this logjam in Parliament is despicable, reprehensible, with parliamentarians fighting like school children, or even worse. And, I mean, you may hold Parliament to ransom, but you don't have any business to hold the people of India to ransom and not allow basic bills to be passed. And I think that is an enduring fallacy of democracy. Why? Several bills. Now, Swapan, I know where your political leanings are. I'm absolutely apolitical, and I couldn't be bothered, whether it's the BJP or the Congress or anyone. And, the difference is that it's all right to talk in conferences like these amongst Indians, but when you go abroad and when you're asked, why is brand India the way it is? That's when you begin to wonder why we become such self-goal scorers in our country. And that's a reality. We love scoring self-goals. And we don't celebrate the good, we don't communicate the good. So on that note, very happy note, may I invite questions. Now, unlike other moderators, I'm pretty rude. So please ask a question. If you want to make a comment, go to Harry Dahl and he'll invite you to speak next year. Karuna.
In the spirit of finding solutions, I actually think that Mr. Qureishi's suggestion, what's pending in the bill apparently, electoral finance reform, is vital to limit corruption. And I would really be interested in sort of hearing precisely what are the various alternatives? What already exists in the bill? And so, for instance, in the States, they have anything above $1,000 in terms of a campaign contribution goes on a website. So transparency is one answer, but another answer that I think Rahul Gandhi proposed in the debate on the Lokpal that got glossed over and missed was that he said that the Lokpal would only provide an accountability mechanism ex post facto, which is that after the corruption has already happened. Before the corruption happens, what would prevent it most is electoral reform. So for instance, one possibility is transparency. The other possibility could be, giving...
What's the question, Karuna?
Limited, allocating funds to fight campaigns. So I was wondering what the options were like, in the bill and outside.
So what are the options in the bill and outside? Now do you know why our judges take so long to deliver judgments?
Because they reasoned.
No, because the councils are all over
Ratio decidendi.
Karuna, I appreciate your comment about Lokpal. That was the point which I made at the peak of the movement when no minister dared to take on Anna Hazare. I said, Lokpal, what will it achieve? Catch a few the top leaders, but through electoral reforms, we want to catch them at the gate. Don't let them come to power. The fact that every week, every 10 days, we have a story when some minister is raped, another is involved in some crime or the other. That is the irony. Police is looking for some criminals with their guns, and suddenly they become ministers, and the same police then gives them security. And they enjoy the security to the hilt. So we feel that the electoral reforms, they may sound very technical terms generally, but they probably will really solve the problem. Because if there are good people in politics, I have often said that, it has become fashionable to condemn all politicians. Now, you can't have a situation when you love democracy and hate politicians. What is it that you want then? So we are good politicians. The fact that we have become a power to reckon with in the last 60 years is also shows our political leadership. Not bureaucracy, but the political leadership. Why hasn't Pakistan done so? So I think there are good leaders, there are good parties, and they need to be clean their act and have a look at this. My suggestion to the government will be, please bring up the bill, and those who will oppose will get exposed, and then there will be a people's backlash. And if you are able to pull it through, nothing like this, balle balle. Either way, you are a winner, but at least try.
Meera. I'll come to you after this. You're allowed diplomatic immunity.
So technology prohibits me. No, I wanted to say that Swapan talked about the need for devolution to the states and not so much centralization as exists today. But at another level, I think what I'd like to add is you also need devolution from the states to the local bodies and the panchayats, because the states are the biggest block in devolution to the local level, and that's where actually people feel directly engaged in democracy and in making the choices of how to spend, how to raise resources, what will it do to our environment. And there we don't have any devolution because the states are opposed to it, since they feel it will be a diminution of their power.
I mean, by and large, I agree with you, but I think there's also a distrust which has come in of the belief what was caricatured as from PM to DM. That was a caricature. But the belief that the center will subvert the state governments by reaching out to the panchayats directly, and therefore, in a sense, indirectly promote a form of centralization, once again, is a real one. And I think it's going to take time. But, like all things, at various stages. But I think gradually we must, I think, a process of encouraging the states to devolve more power. And I think this is where, when you get politicians coming up at the panchayat level, and as panchayat elections get more bitterly fought, the struggle for resources will be all that greater. And particularly now, it's very important is to get some municipal order. I mean, one of the biggest problems which we face in India is municipal government in the sort of B, C, and D class towns. It's non-existent. Their resource raising capacities are zero because they haven't been streamlined, people haven't worked on those things.
Jay, just come, this gentleman, then you. Gentleman here.
Is there a connect between, say, regression and democracy? I would not call it regression, I would call it status quoism, or recently people call it policy paralysis and all that. My question is that one of the major reasons probably which has not been discussed is overemphasis on populism and political opportunism, which has not allowed our leaders, who are also responsible, intelligent, bright, can lead us to take tough decisions at times which will not get them votes for them or the party. I think this is the main reason for this status quoism or regression.
I mean, you just have to agree because it's a hypothesis. Jay.
Having been in the political system, there's a question I ask everybody, and nobody's given me an answer yet. Quraishi Saab, you reminded me again. You mentioned the link between politicians and bureaucrats. Why is it everybody leaves the private sector out? because you can easily get 1 crore in cash, but you will not get 1 lakh in check, no matter how much you beg for it. And this is a problem honest politicians have. And where is the taxation problem? Where is the political vendetta problem? All the things that are being made as excuses for actually seeing that legitimate check payments for politicians in elections can happen.
I was talking about the nexus between bureaucracy and politicians very simply, that unless they work together, there cannot be corruption. It's a reality. Lots of leaders have told us that minimum it costs 5 crores to 10 crores. Where does the money come from? That's why they ask the bureaucracy to pay them and also give them license to pocket what they can in the process. And nobody is interested in catching the thieves. So, which is why we feel that after all, there is a wisdom in the law of putting a ceiling on election expenditure. And we have to find our ways. We have tried our best, the fact that we see the money, but they come up with new modus operandi. For instance, earlier the money used to go on the seat of the car in a briefcase. Then it went to the boot. Then it went to the door of the car. Then we found DG police taking the money out of the politician, because who will stop his car? We found ministers taking the money in their aeroplanes and helicopters.
But sir, it wouldn't happen if there were check payments. That's what I'm saying.
You know, then we also came across situations when the money was being taken in funeral vans and ambulances. We had the dilemma that if we stop an ambulance and if the patient dies, the Supreme Court or the court will haul us up. So we said, don't stop the ambulance, let the ambulance go to the destination, to the hospital. When the patient is taken out, then see the ambulance can catch the money. So no, they're developing a modus operandi, but which is the reason if they spend a lot of money, they have to recover, and that is where the corruption begins.
No, I'll just make a small point in this case. You know, one thing, there are certain facts which should come out. In my understanding, there are about between 100 and 125 entities, which I include individuals, who pay contributions of 1 crore and above to political parties. This is based on various, my own sort of understanding and information gauge. Secondly, there are tax benefits available to both individuals and corporates to pay by check. Why is it that a minusculity only does so? And the reason for it is the basic fear of political retribution. This is what all of them say, that we would love to pay you by check, we would love to put it in our books, but assuming the other side comes to power, are we not going to get harassed? And I don't think anybody has a, you know, the manner in which some of the investigative agencies have been used gives people no reason to be optimistic that a certain level playing field will exist.
If I may also comment on this, you know, we discussed this issue with the business and industry, because after all, they are a very important stakeholder. What is it that they want? The case of transparency versus accountability and confidentiality. They said same thing as Swapan is saying, that if we pay, in any case, they have to pay to all parties. But then if they pay more to one and they pay less to the other, then they have a permanent enemy there. So their confidentiality requirement was that cash is a better alternative, because we don't want to create enemies. But they came up with an alternative solution. They said if you create a fund where we contribute and give it to, say, the election commission can run that fund, and from there the parties can be funded. So funding parties and funding elections are two different issues we need to examine.
No, but I think, I mean, to directly answer Jay's question, there is an enormous nexus between the corporate world and politicians. I mean, it's no rocket science. And I think corporate India is as criminal as, you know, I mean, corporate India would love to blame the politician and the bureaucrat, but the criminality begins there because they believe, and they often do, tweak the system with money power. The solutions have been found, and I'll list one or two. Number one, I know of 4 companies, and not all of them are my clients, The Tatas, Mahindra, Bajaj, and in the good old days, I remember ITC Gujarat Ambuja. I don't know about Airtel. I mean, they must be doing it, but I don't know. So they've created a form of disbursement which is linked to performance, almost like proportional representation. How much we paid you last time, how much did we contribute, and they do it across national parties. So they won't fund a regional party, they'll fund national party, or they'll contribute. Karuna mentioned the US example. The US example actually is the best functioning example. Apart from website declarations, even corporations are limited in terms of how much they can contribute. You are limited in terms of how much the grand old party or the Democrats can actually raise through dinners. Those dinners then have to be hosted by other people. I mean, Mira would know that better. But there is no question that today of 100% funding, 90% is in cash, 10% is by check. But again, we're looking at the problem. The solution is, if these companies were or are doing the right thing, why on earth should they be worried about political retribution? It's not political retribution alone. It's political maneuverability that they seek. They want to put eggs in many baskets. So it's not by exclusion, it's by inclusion. And if you stop that, then you begin to curb this utter waste of money and the criminality therein. So, I mean, to my mind, that's how it's got to be done.
Yeah, but is the way out? What's the way out of this? The way out is very simple.
He suggested a fund.
No, also, that if you reduce the discretionary power of government, then the need for quid pro quo in contributions is going to be less.
But it'll never happen.
No, it has happened in various states.
Gujarat.
Where there is greater transparency as far as competitive bidding, for example, is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I know in Bengal, no one pays any money because there's none left. Because business is so brilliantly being managed by MD.
Elections in Bihar are invariably subsidized from other states. I mean, that's a fact.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions. There's a lady there, and then there's a gentleman right at the back in a colorful shirt. But obviously, we are from Calcutta, so we will yield to the woman.
Thank you. My question is with respect to Mr. Dasgupta's comment.
Dr. Dasgupta.
Dr. Dasgupta's comment. I stand corrected. That wealth...
And he's not like Dr. Rana Kapoor, who's got an honorary degree.
The comment was that wealth generated from the resources of a particular state should be plowed back for the development of that particular state. So my question is, what is the contribution of the people to such kind of natural resources which the state is blessed with? And if we do adopt and advocate such a policy, how will it help nationalism?
Well, I mean, this is the perennial debate about whether you're reconciled to uneven development or whether you want a redistributive center. I mean, this is really, it's at the heart of the problem.
So, but
should Jharkhand, just give you an example, Jharkhand has some of the most, it's the richest in terms of mineral wealth. But look at its plight. Does Jharkhand feature on the top of the economic league? No. Some of it is due to malgovernance. Some of it is due to corruption. But a lot of it is due to governmental policies whereby the extraction of mineral wealth from Jharkhand is actually utilized elsewhere. The Chief Minister of Chhattisgarh told me that if, for example, royalties were increased and mining in certain mica and other things were allowed, then there would be zero taxation in any other sphere in that state. Now, these are questions we've got to make an intelligent choice. But my fear is that if we don't, for example, if we don't give greater share of the oil royalties of Assam to Assam, we are going to produce a form of virulent regionalism which will again affect nationalism. So there has to be a greater sense of balance. I think we've erred too much in favor of centralization. It's time to bend the stick in the other direction.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Want to ask these two gentlemen about voter behavior. It is in this context that whichever politician I meet these days, they tell me that over the last 10 and 15 years, it is not.
Sir, 1 minute. Just speak slowly. You've enough time. This is not parliament. Speak slowly so we can understand.
I just want to ask them about voter behavior. Because while talking of democracy, we are always focusing on politicians. But ultimately, the guy who votes them are voters. And whatever voters I speak to in the last, they say, whatever politicians I speak to, they tell me that in the last 10, 15 years, the voter has become very greedy.
Has become?
Become very greedy. And though in the good old days, you could say, make a road in a village, or make a school or a college, and the voter would be happy. Today, they want direct cash transfer. So this is one of the reasons which is...
So what is your question, sir?
This is my question. I want to ask their opinion about this. Do they agree with this thing that...
Oh, I got it. Has the voter become greedy?
Greedier.
Okay, greedier. Although I have to check if Renan Martin approves that usage.
I have not read Renan Martin, you may.
Now, voters' greed can be in two forms. One, that is greedy for more development, which is healthy. The other is looking for cash, liquor, which also is a reality. We decided to deal with this voter behavior issue, and we set up a voter education division. We did a study, knowledge, attitude, behavior, and practices studies in all 11 states which went to poll recently, the last 2 years, to find out exactly the answer to what you're saying. Why do they behave the way they do? Are they becoming greedy? Are they swayed by the promises? Or can something be done? We found that this helped a lot. First, their pessimism about democracy, they were never coming out to vote. The urban voters did not come to vote. Only the toughies. Women were not coming out because they were scared of violence at the polling station. In all these 11 states, highest ever turnout of voters was achieved. But I'll give you one most interesting example. When we were holding elections in Tamil Nadu, I analyzed the state specifically for its ground realities. West Bengal and Tamil Nadu were going to the poll at the same time, same size state. Our focus in Tamil Nadu was money power. In West Bengal, our focus was on the gun power, and which is why we had to do 7 phases of a poll in the West Bengal and single phase in Tamil Nadu. Every political party said that there is so much of money, and even voters expect money. We went to Kerala the next day. We asked the politicians, what is the situation there? To our pleasant surprise, they said there is no problem of money power in Kerala. We said, why? They said, our voter is smart. They, even if we give money, they have decided who they're going to vote for. Money will make no difference, so why waste money? I think now, taking a cue from this, when we went to Tamil Nadu with our voter education program, we made exactly this kind of appeal. And civil society got involved. We got fantastic response. I was getting 300 SMSs on my or emails on my BlackBerry those days. People themselves reporting how money is being distributed. An envelope has been slipped under the door. How somebody has thrown a packet from the window of saris and dhotis. Instead of lapping up that money in saris and dhotis, those same guys are complaining, please catch them. We don't want this money. So I think we're blaming a voter for that kind of greed. Liquor, that can be taken care of by voter education. And media, I must say, played a very important role in that. But voters' greed for asking for more development, I think that is perfectly justified. And and some politicians say that voters are very ungrateful. Whatever you may do for them, they still throw you out in the next election.
You know, one of the curious things is that if you look at the index of development in the past 2 decades, you'll find that the evidence of expensive elections happen to more or less coincide with the states which have achieved the rapid. In the southern states, it's particularly virulent, this form of what might be called retail corruption. I mean, an assembly segment in Karnataka, for example, I think they spend about 3 crores. Now, I doubt if Dinesh Trivedi is there in Barakpur, I doubt if he'll spend even unofficially, nobody's going to spend anything half or even quarter of that. I mean, apart from Gujarat, where it's still very modest, economic development and retail corruption seems to go hand in hand.
Yeah, but it's unfair to bring Dinesh in because you can't match Dinesh's charisma with that of the Reddy brothers. Okay, last question to Professor Harry Doll.
I just want to quickly share this thought. And the question is, both the speakers and Suhel have triggered a very important debate here and looking forward. I'm not going to mention the name of the state, but from the horse's mouth, one particular state in the Northeast.
No, tell us.
No, we can't. The one gentleman got a contract for 800 crores to build roads. We're talking about infrastructure. As a part of the election SOP, he told very clearly, I get 30% cash back, and the rest of it is distributed amongst my cousins, friends, uncles, aunts, everybody else, down the road to the village panchayat, to everybody else, so that this money is spent. I said, how much do you actually spend out of that 800 crores? About 20 to 30%. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is there's an earlier reference about a Kacha road, and then somebody talked about the fact that, you're not really building assets, which is a very important point. This leakage is, how does the Election Commission look at this? I mean, how do you stop this kind of thing? You're not building assets, and this is coming out from contracts, and it's just, I mean, we're talking about corruption, but this is ridiculous amount, because here thousands of crores are being poured into so-called infrastructure, but that infrastructure is not coming. So is there any mechanism there?
Well, leakage is actually basically the general issue of corruption, and we are concerned only about the election days. We are nobody outside the election time. However, they came across a complaint that the money, the crores that you're talking about, particularly the MP LAD scheme or MLA, local area development scheme. Every MP gets 5 crores every year for local area development work. We found in some states that this money was being accumulated for 4 years and 6 months, and then in the last 6 months, then all these crores will be distributed, some development works will start. We wanted an audit done. Of course, by the time we could have collected all the material, but we have set the ball in motion. We do want to examine this, and I'm sure Election Commission will propose a reform, that this money should be allowed to lapse every year. Otherwise, it is misused, accumulated for the last few months. As it is, we see that all the, we are always often accused that because of election, because of the model code, we stop development work. But I can't understand why all the bright ideas of development come to the politician's mind after 4 years and 11 months in power. And only in the last month, all the bright ideas which they want to implement, which we don't allow, because then that is, those ideas are basically to seduce the voters, to get an unfair advantage on the opposition, because only the ruling party has that advantage. So that is what we try to neutralize. Our role is only confined to this bit, but wider leakage, that's a very serious issue.
Why don't you send Vinod Rai an email with the name of that?
But I think there's an interesting point there, and particularly in the Northeast. I mean, for example, the road from Tawang, I think it's been built 5 times on paper. What has happened in the Northeast, and I think this is a matter of great concern, is that corruption has been deliberately encouraged and institutionalized as a method of fighting insurgency. And I think this is something very worrying. And it actually, it corrodes that society. It goes just beyond corruption. It's a far more serious issue.
Okay, on that happy note, everything's fine. The country is doing well. Everything's working brilliantly. If there are few leakages and all, bad luck. Harry, thank you for that probing question to end this very stimulating discussion. Swapan, as always, you've been apolitical, neutral, and extremely intuitive. Dr. Quraishi, a real doctor, has been fabulous with his views on democracy. Peace to the world. God bless America. Thank you.